The great crystalline palace of Varela stood like a crown beneath the soft light of its twin suns. Its walls shimmered in pale blues and gold, each spire stretching toward the sky like a frozen flame. Inside the grand hall, the air was filled with the scent of silver blossoms and the soft hum of the crystal floors under countless footsteps. Princess Alara stood at the center, her tall figure wrapped in royal silver robes. A delicate circlet rested on her forehead, shaped like the wings of the Silari bird, symbol of her family's rule. Her eyes, sharp and calm, scanned the crowd. Today was important, not for her, but for her people. The interstellar peace treaty between the Varelans and the humans was about to be signed. Round her, members of the High Council sat in their floating chairs, their long robes trailing like liquid light. The humans stood together at the far end of the hall, their uniforms more simple, made of deep blue cloth with silver stripes on the shoulders. They looked smaller than most Varelans, less graceful. Their skin tones varied, their postures straight but rigid. Then the royal announcer's voice rang out, Envoy Thomas of Earth, Protector to Her Highness Princess Alara, stepped forward. From the human group, a man moved toward her. He was tall for a human, with dark hair neatly tied back, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. He wore a utility belt with various tools and a simple ceremonial sword, more symbolic than practical. His steps were measured, each one echoing in the silent hall. When he reached the center, he bowed slightly, not deeply like a subject, but with a respectful nod. Alara, Princess of Varela, he said, his voice steady, I am assigned as your protector by the terms of the treaty between our peoples. There was a pause. The council members looked at her, waiting for her response. The treaty was clear. In this new age of peace, an exchange of guardians would take place between their royal and high-ranking families. A Varelan would guard a human leader, and a human would guard a Varelan royal. Alara lifted her chin, her voice smooth but cold. I do not require a human protector. A few council members shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat, but Alara wasn't finished. I respect the terms of the treaty, she continued, but I will never bond with a human. I will accept your presence only because my people demand it, not because I trust your kind with my life. The words carried through the chamber like shards of ice. Thomas didn't flinch. His face remained calm, though a flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. Understood, Your Highness, he replied, but my trust in you will not depend on your trust in me. My task is clear. The council leader, an elder named Mivrin, leaned forward in his chair. Your Highness, the bond is not only tradition, it is a safeguard. You may one day need it. I will never need it, Alara said firmly. I have my people, my guards, and my own strength. That is enough. Thomas said nothing more. He simply stepped back and took his place behind her as the ceremony moved forward. The signing of the treaty was long and filled with formalities. The humans spoke in their language first, then the Varelans, each promising cooperation, trade, and shared defense. The air was heavy with history. This was the first time in decades that these two civilizations had stood together in peace. But while the officials smiled and clapped, Alara's thoughts were elsewhere. She had heard the stories of humans, impulsive, fragile, living short lives, brave perhaps, but reckless. They could not sense the flow of crystal energy like her people could. They lacked the deep connection to the living world around them. How could such a being truly protect her still? She knew refusing to protect her outright would be a political insult, so she allowed Thomas to follow her as they left the hall. The crystal doors closing behind them, the palace corridors were quiet compared to the busy hall. Light from the twin suns filtered through tall windows, scattering across the crystal walls in rainbows. Alara walked with her hands clasped behind her back, her pace steady. You do not speak much, she said at last without turning around. I speak when needed, Thomas replied, and I listen when needed. More? She almost smiled, but didn't. Do all humans answer questions with riddles? Do all Varelans ask questions they already know the answer to? He countered lightly. For the first time, she glanced back at him. His expression was neutral, but there was a spark in his eyes, not defiance, but readiness. She didn't know if she liked it. Later that day, as the palace prepared for the evening celebrations, Alara sat in the observatory chamber, looking out at the sky. The twin suns were lowering, their light painting the horizon in shades of gold and violet. Far beyond the peaceful view, in the darker reaches of space, she knew trouble always waited. But she dismissed the thought. Her world was strong. Her fleets were fast. Varela had survived many storms before, and it would again. Behind her, Thomas stood silently, his gaze scanning the chamber. He wasn't admiring the view. He was looking for weak points, hidden corners, possible threats. His training had taught him to never trust the surface of peace. You do not have to stand so rigid. Alara said without turning, "I'm not here for comfort," he replied simply. She almost told him that no threat could touch her here, inside the strongest palace in the sector. But she didn't, because for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow cross the sky, far away, small, but moving fast. And in that moment, though she didn't realize it yet, the first thread of her fate had been tied to the human she had sworn never to bond with. The celebration in the crystalline palace lasted deep into the night. Lights danced across the tall spires, music floated in the air, and guests from both Varela and Earth mingled in cautious friendship. But not everyone in the galaxy celebrated. Far beyond the shining cities, at the very edge of the Varelan star system, a place called the Rift stirred with activity. The Rift was a dark, uncharted region of space, a maze of shifting asteroids, hidden currents, and strange energy storms. Few ships dared to travel through it, and those who did often never returned. Rumors spoke of raiders and pirates hiding within, striking at trade ships before vanishing back into the dark. Thomas stood on the palace balcony the next morning, watching the city below. From up here, the capital looked like a living jewel, bridges of crystal, waterways glowing faintly under the morning light, airships drifting slowly between towers. But his mind was far from the beauty. He had been receiving small bursts of data through his wrist communicator since dawn. His contacts on the human deep space patrols had noticed something strange. Multiple energy spikes coming from the Rift. Large ships were gathering there, and the energy patterns matched known pirate fleets. Dangerous ones, armed with stolen alien tech. Thomas frowned, his eyes narrowing. He had seen this pattern before, on another mission years ago. It meant an attack was being prepared. Inside the council chamber, Princess Alara was speaking with the High Council about trade routes and cultural exchanges. Her voice was calm, confident. To her, the treaty was already working. Her people were safe, her city peaceful. When the meeting ended, Thomas approached her. "Your Highness," he said, keeping his tone respectful, "I have received reports about unusual activity in the Rift. It would be wise to increase patrols on the outer borders." Alara looked at him with a mix of patience and mild annoyance. "The Rift has always been full of strange signals, Envoy. It is a dangerous place, yes, but far from here. Our fleets guard the trade lanes well. There is no need for concern. With respect," Thomas said carefully, "raiders hide in the Rift because it gives them cover. If they are gathering in large numbers, they may be planning something bigger than a simple raid." One of the council members, Elder Vinyl, spoke from his seat. "The princess is right. We have monitored the Rift for centuries. It has never posed a real threat to the capital." Thomas didn't argue further. He could see their minds were set, but he had learned long ago that ignoring small warnings led to great disasters. Later that day, Alara and Thomas walked through the palace gardens. Silver-leaf trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the scent of star-bloom flowers filled the air. "You seem restless," Alara said at last. "I am," Thomas admitted. "I've learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong in space, it usually is." She gave a small smile. "Perhaps humans live shorter lives because they worry too much." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Or perhaps we survive because we prepare for what others think will never happen." Her smile faded slightly, but she said nothing more. That night, Thomas didn't sleep much. He studied the latest scans of the Rift from his communicator. The pirate fleet's numbers were growing. Their ships were forming into a tight formation, something they only did before striking. And worse, there were energy readings from weapons powerful enough to pierce planetary shields. He sent encrypted warnings to the human fleet nearby, asking them to be ready. He also prepared his own small escape plan in case the capital came under attack. Not because he didn't trust Varellan defenses, but because he believed in always having a second option. Meanwhile, far away, deep inside the rift, a massive ship drifted between the shadows of asteroids. Inside, the pirate leader, a towering alien named Varrock, stood before a star map. His eyes glowed faint red under the dim lights. The capital is unprepared, he told his crew. Their eyes are on their celebration. Their leaders believe. The rift cannot touch them. We will prove them wrong. One of his lieutenants asked. And the princess, Varrock smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. She will be taken. A royal hostage will ensure their surrender. And with the human protector by her side, we will show both worlds their weakness. Back in the capital, Alara stood in the high observatory tower, gazing at the stars. She had grown up watching those distant points of light, dreaming of exploring them. To her, the galaxy was full of beauty. But now she wondered why Thomas kept looking at the same stars with such suspicion. She remembered the shadow she thought she saw days ago in the sky. She had dismissed it then, but now it lingered in her mind. Thomas entered the observatory quietly. "You should rest," he said. "I could say the same to you," she replied. He stepped beside her, both of them looking out into the endless night. "There's something out there, princess. I don't know when, but it's coming. When it does, I need you to trust me." Alara hesitated. Trusting a human was not in her nature. But something in his voice, steady, sure, without fear, made her pause. "We will see," she said at last. Thomas gave a small nod. "We will." The twin suns of Varel were lowering, their golden light spilling across the crystal towers of the capital. Evening had settled like a calm blanket over the city. Airships drifted lazily between the spires. Market streets began to quiet, and the palace prepared for the evening meal. From the high balcony, Princess Alara looked over her city with pride. It was safe, beautiful, and strong. The very thought of danger reaching this place felt impossible. But Thomas didn't share her sense of calm. Standing a few steps behind her, his eyes never rested on the view. Instead, they scanned the skies, the streets, and the shadows. His wrist communicator was silent, but that silence only made his unease grow. He had expected a warning from his contacts in the human fleet, but there was nothing. That could only mean one thing: communication lines were already being jammed. As the suns dipped lower, the palace guards lit the tall flame crystals along the outer walls. Their soft blue light shimmered across the marble paths. It was then, in that moment between light and darkness, that Thomas saw it. Far above, a faint streak crossed the sky, too fast for a meteor, too straight for a bird. Then another, and another. He stepped forward sharply. "Princess, we need to leave the balcony." Alara looked at him with mild annoyance. "You see shadows in the sky and the deep." Distant thumes shook the air. The ground trembled beneath their feet. From the far horizon, dark shapes appeared in the sky, moving fast, sleek ships with jagged wings, their black hulls glowing with the red heat of weapons charging. Alarms rang through the palace. The calm evening shattered into chaos. Guards ran to their stations. Defensive shields began to rise over the city, and citizens hurried into underground shelters. "Attackers," Alara whispered in disbelief. "Here, in the capital." "Yes," Thomas said firmly, already moving toward her. "They're here for you. We have to move, now." Before she could argue, a deafening blast shook the palace. The shields, barely half raised, flickered under the impact. A section of the outer wall exploded, raining crystal shards into the gardens. Enemy raiders dropped from the sky on small landing craft, their armor black and their weapons glowing faint orange. They moved with deadly precision, cutting down palace defenses as they advanced. Thomas drew the ceremonial sword from his side. The blade looked decorative, but he had sharpened it earlier for exactly this reason. With his other hand, He activated a small plasma pistol hidden in his belt. "Alara, with me," he ordered, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. They ran through the palace corridors, the sound of battle echoing behind them. Guards tried to form protective lines, but the raiders were pushing hard toward the royal chambers. At one intersection, a blast hit the wall just above Alara's head. She flinched, but Thomas pulled her down behind a support column. "They're cutting us off," Thomas said. Scanning the hall, "We can't get to the main gates. We'll have to use the lower escape tunnels." Alara hesitated. "Those tunnels are ancient. Some have collapsed." "Then we'll hope the right ones haven't," he replied, already moving. The deeper they went into the palace, the darker and quieter it became. The polished crystal floors gave way to rough stone. The air smelled faintly of dust and old earth, but the quiet didn't last. A sudden roar echoed through the lower hall. Not the sound of a weapon, but something alive. From the shadows, a raider in heavy armor charged toward them, a massive blade in his hands. Thomas shoved Alara behind him and met the attacker head-on. Steel rang against steel as sword met blade. The raider was strong, but Thomas was faster. He ducked under the heavy swing, stepped in close, and drove the edge of his sword into the weak joint at the raider's side. The armored figure collapsed, his weapon clattering to the ground. Thomas didn't stop moving. "Go. Move." They reached the hidden entrance to the escape tunnels. A narrow stairwell behind a carved wall panel in the old archives. The door hissed shut behind them, blocking out the sounds of the battle above. The tunnels were dim, lit only by faint glowing stones set into the walls. Their footsteps echoed as they descended deeper. Alara's breathing was quick, but her voice was steady. "You've done this before." Thomas didn't look back. "Too many times." "What do you think they want?" she asked. "You," he said bluntly. "A princess is a powerful bargaining tool, and if they take you into the rift, your people won't be able to find you easily." She felt a chill at his words. The rift, the place she had dismissed as far away and harmless, was suddenly very real. They emerged into an underground chamber where the tunnel split into two directions. Thomas paused. Studying the faint air currents, left, he decided. "The other way leads to the old water channels. We drown." They followed the left path, moving quickly, but after several minutes, the tunnel began to shake. A deep rumble rolled through the walls. They found the lower entrances. Thomas said grimly, "We're running out of time." At last, they reached a hidden door that opened into the wild outer lands beyond the city. Tall silver-leaf trees swayed in the wind, their branches whispering softly. The air smelled fresh, but there was no time to admire it. Behind them, faint voices echoed in the tunnel. The raiders were close. Thomas stepped out first, scanning the forest. "We move fast and quiet," he said. "Stay close to me, and no matter what happens, don't stop running until I tell you." Alara nodded, for the first time. There was no trace of argument in her eyes. She understood now that the human she had refused to bond with was the only reason she was still alive. As they slipped into the forest shadows, the capital burned behind them. Raiders swarmed the palace walls, and the once peaceful city echoed with the sounds of war. The princess had never believed the rift could reach her, but now its shadow had fallen over her home, and the night had only just begun. The forest outside the capital stretched far and wide, lit faintly by the glow of Varela's twin moons. The silver leaves of the towering trees swayed in the cool night wind, their movements whispering like voices. The air smelled fresh, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere far away. Thomas and Princess Alara moved quickly along a narrow animal path. Their steps were light, but every fallen branch underfoot seemed to louden the stillness. Somewhere behind them, the faint hum of engines and distant shouts told them the raiders were still searching. "Keep your head low," Thomas whispered. Without slowing, Alara adjusted the silver fabric of her robe, tying it tighter so it wouldn't snag on branches. She was not used to traveling through wild terrain. Her life had been filled with marble corridors and guarded halls. But she forced herself to match Thomas's pace. The deeper they went, the denser the forest became. The moonlight faded beneath thick canopies, replaced by a dim glow from the bioluminescent moss growing on the tree trunks. Strange shapes moved in the shadows, harmless night creatures. But their glowing eyes still made Alara tense. After nearly an hour, Thomas slowed and signaled for her to stop. He crouched low, scanning the dark ahead. "What is it?" she whispered. "Tracks," he murmured, pointing to the ground. The dirt was disturbed, and faint impressions showed the heavy boots of the raiders. "They've been through here. Not long ago." Alara felt her stomach tighten. "Then we are going the wrong way?" "Not exactly," Thomas replied. "It means they're searching in circles. If we keep moving carefully, we can stay ahead." They continued, but the path soon ended at a wide river. The water glowed faint blue under the moonlight, a sign of the minerals that flowed from the northern mountains. The current was strong, and the water was freezing. Thomas studied the riverbank. "We cross here," he decided. Alara hesitated. "It's too deep and cold. It will also hide our trail," he said firmly. "The raiders won't follow easily through the water." Without waiting for her reply, he stepped into the river. The cold bit into his legs immediately, but he moved steadily, keeping his weapon out of the water. After a moment, Alara followed, trying not to shiver. The current pulled at them, but Thomas kept a strong grip on her arm until they reached the far bank. They climbed out, soaked and breathing hard, but at least the forest ahead was untouched by enemy tracks. They pushed on, deeper into the wilderness. Now and then, Thomas stopped to listen, tilting his head slightly, eyes scanning every shadow. Alara noticed that he moved with the same caution whether he was in a palace hallway or a wild forest. "You're too quiet," she finally said, breaking the silence. "That's the idea," Thomas replied without looking back. "I mean," she continued, "you've hardly spoken since we left the city." He glanced over his shoulder briefly. Words don't help much when someone's hunting you. Listening does. The forest began to change as they moved farther from the city. The trees grew taller and closer together, their roots twisting like giant snakes across the ground. Small glowing insects floated through the air, lighting patches of the darkness with pale green light. They finally stopped in a sheltered clearing, where a thick rock wall rose on one side. Thomas checked the surroundings before setting down his small pack. "We'll rest here for a short while," he said. Alara sank onto a smooth rock, brushing wet hair from her face. She had never been so far from the city before, and the wilderness felt alive in a way she wasn't used to. The sounds of insects, the rustle of leaves, and the distant call of night creatures surrounded them completely. "Do you think the palace still stands?" she asked quietly. Thomas paused, then answered honestly, "Parts of it, maybe. But if the raiders wanted you, they would have kept attacking until they forced you out. They'll follow until they find you or lose your trail completely." She looked down at her hands. "I never thought they could reach the capital. I thought our walls were strong enough." "They were strong," Thomas said. "But strength means nothing if your enemy knows how to go around it." After a brief rest, they moved again. This time, Thomas led them along a path that climbed upward into rocky hills. The higher they went, the more open the forest became, allowing them to see farther in the moonlight. Halfway up a slope, Thomas froze. He raised a hand, signaling Alara to stop. From below, faint movement caught his eye. A group of dark-armored raiders moving through the trees. They carried scanning devices, their light sweeping across the forest floor. "They're still close," Thomas whispered. "We can't let them spot us on the ridge. This way." They moved sideways along the slope, keeping low among the rocks. Every step was careful. The sound of raiders' voices drifted up, but they stayed hidden until the search group passed below. By the time they reached the top of the ridge, both were breathing heavily. Thomas scanned the horizon. Far in the distance, faint orange light flickered. The city still burned. Alara's voice was quiet. "It looks so far away now." "It is," Thomas said. "And that's good. Distance is safety." She studied him for a moment. "You've done this before, haven't you? Escaping, hiding." "Yes," he said simply. "More times than I wanted to. The difference now is I'm not just keeping myself alive." They descended the far side of the ridge into another dense part of the forest. The ground was softer here, muffling their steps. A stream trickled nearby, masking small sounds they made as they moved. Finally, Thomas stopped near a hollow tree. "We'll stay here until dawn," he said. "Moving in the dark for too long increases our risk. At first light, we'll head toward the mountain caves. Harder to find us there." Alara nodded, sitting carefully on a dry patch of moss. For the first time, she didn't question his decision. She was starting to understand that in the wild, his instincts were sharper than hers. As she settled against the tree, she looked at him. "I still don't know why the treaty chose you to protect me." Thomas adjusted his pack and sat nearby, his eyes still scanning the trees. "Because I don't give up, Princess. And because when I say I'll keep someone alive, I mean it." The night deepened around them, filled with the soft hum of life in the forest. Above, the moons kept their silent watch. Alara closed her eyes for a moment, but she knew sleep would be light, because somewhere out there, in the same dark forest, the hunters were still searching. The forest was quiet at dawn. A soft mist hung in the air, drifting between the silver-leaved trees. Dew clung to the moss and rocks, and the faint light of the twin suns touched the horizon. Thomas woke first. He had slept lightly, his hand never far from his weapon. The night had been calm, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way. The raiders would not give up easily. He glanced toward Alara. She was still resting against the hollow tree, her silver robe wrapped tightly around her. Her breathing was steady, but her face held a faint tension, as if even in sleep she could feel the danger around them. "Princess," he said quietly. Her eyes opened at once. She looked at him, then at the pale morning light filtering through the mist. "We're still in the forest." "Yes," Thomas replied, rising to his feet. "But we can't stay here. We head for the mountains. The caves there will give us better cover." Alara stood, brushing dew from her robe. "Then let's move before the hunters wake." They set off quickly, following a narrow trail that wound upward. The forest began to thin, replaced by rocky ground and low shrubs. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of rain. But by midday, the weather changed. Dark clouds gathered, heavy and fast. The wind picked up, and the sound of distant thunder rolled through the hills. Thomas stopped to scan the horizon. "That's not an ordinary storm," he said. Alara frowned. "What do you mean?" He pointed to the sky, the color of those clouds, and the way the wind shifts. "This is a star-flame surge." Her eyes widened slightly. "That's a rare kind of storm. My people avoid it. It carries energy bursts strong enough to burn through stone and anything else caught in the open." Thomas added. "The wind grew stronger, pushing against them. Flashes of strange orange light began to pulse within the clouds, and the air around them seemed to hum faintly. "We need shelter now," Thomas said, scanning the rocky slopes for a cave or hollow. But the ground here was open and exposed. The nearest cover was too far away. Alara's voice was tight. "If the surge reaches us here, we won't survive." Thomas kept searching, but there was nothing. The storm was moving too fast. He turned to her. "There's another way." She shook her head before he even spoke the words. "No." "Yes," he said firmly. "The bond." The Varellan life bond was an ancient practice. It linked to beings, so their energy could protect and sustain them. It was rare even among her people, and unheard of with humans. Alara had refused it when the treaty was signed. "I told you I would never." "This is not about pride," Thomas interrupted sharply. "It's about living through the next 10 minutes. The surge can't kill us if we bond. Our energy will shield us." She hesitated, the wind pulling at her hair, the air buzzing with the storm's approach. "You don't even know if it will work with a human." Thomas stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then let's find out now, or we both die here." The clouds above swirled violently. A bright flare of orange light split the sky, followed by a deep, shaking roar. The first wave of the surge was coming. Alara's hands trembled slightly. She had never bonded outside her own kind. It was risky, but so was doing nothing. She met his eyes. "Fine, but do exactly as I say." Thomas nodded. She placed her hands against his chest, closing her eyes. He did the same, resting his palms lightly over her heart. She began to speak in the ancient Varellan tongue, a rhythm of words that felt older than the palace itself. Thomas felt it first as a warmth in his chest. Spreading outward, the air between them shimmered faintly, like heat rising from stone. Alara's energy reached for his, and something deep within him answered. The storm struck. A wave of burning orange light rolled across the hillside, tearing at the ground, blasting small rocks into shards, but where they stood, a soft, silver blue sphere of energy surrounded them. The surge hit the shield and broke apart, flowing around them like water around stone. Thomas felt the heat, but it didn't burn. Instead, he felt Alara's heartbeat, her fear, her strength, as if it were his own. Alara, in turn, felt the calm steadiness in him, the unshakable focus that kept him moving forward no matter the danger. When the surge finally passed, the clouds began to break apart, and the hum in the air faded. The protective sphere dissolved slowly, leaving only the smell of scorched earth around them. They stepped back, the bond still faintly glowing between them. Thomas looked at her. Well, it worked. Alara didn't answer right away. She was still feeling the connection, not just the memory of it, but the quiet pulse of shared awareness that lingered. She could sense his presence even with her eyes closed. This changes nothing, she said finally. Though her voice lacked the sharpness it once had, Thomas gave a faint, almost amused smile. Of course, but they both knew it wasn't true. They moved on, the mountains now closer. The bond made them move almost in sync. She would step aside before he warned her of a rock in the path, and he would slow before she needed to catch her breath. By late afternoon, they reached the entrance to a narrow canyon that led into the deeper mountains. This will hide us from the sky, Thomas said. But before they could enter, a faint sound reached them, the distant whine of engines. Alara's eyes narrowed. Raiders. Thomas glanced toward the canyon. Then we keep moving. But if they're this close, it means the hunt is far from over. The bond between them hummed softly, a reminder that their survival now rested on something Alara had sworn she would never accept. And somewhere in the shadows of the mountains, the enemy was closing in. The sky above the mountain canyon was dark, but not with the peaceful shadow of night. Heavy clouds rolled in, carrying the scent of rain mixed with something metallic and sharp. The smell of machines and weapons. Thomas and Princess Alara moved quickly along the rocky path. The bond between them still pulsed softly, linking their senses and thoughts. It was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a connection that allowed them to move as one. Ahead, the deep black of the rift waited like a hungry beast. The place was a maze of jagged rocks, unstable energy fields, and endless shadows. Pirates had made their base here, hidden from any prying eyes or scanners. We're close, Thomas whispered, glancing at the data on his wrist device. The pirates' main camp is just ahead. Alara nodded. We can't let them hold me. If they use me as a hostage, it will destroy the peace between our worlds. Thomas smiled faintly. We'll stop that from happening. The entrance to the pirate base was a narrow crevice between two giant rock formations, hidden by swirling energy fields that scrambled sensors. It was almost invisible from a distance. Thomas took the lead. Stay close and keep quiet. These pirates are dangerous, and they don't hesitate to kill. Alara's heart beat faster, but the bond helped her keep calm. She felt Thomas's steady breath, his cautious steps, his sharp focus. Together, they slipped through the energy fields and into the base. Inside, the camp was a chaotic mix of technology and raw nature. Makeshift buildings of metal and rock stood beside ancient trees that somehow still lived. Raiders moved in groups, speaking harsh languages, carrying heavy weapons. Alara stayed close behind Thomas, watching everything with sharp eyes. This was not her world, but she was learning quickly. Thomas pointed to a control tower in the center of the camp. That's where they keep their communication systems and the holding cells. If we get there, we can shut down their alarms and free anyone they have captured. Alara's voice was steady but fierce. Then let's move. They crept through the camp, using shadows and silence as their allies. The bond allowed them to anticipate each other's moves. Alara would hold her breath just before Thomas rounded a corner, and Thomas would signal silently when a guard was near. But the closer they got to the control tower, the thicker the enemy presence became. Raiders patrolled in pairs, their eyes sharp and their weapons ready. At one point, they nearly stumbled into a group of 5 pirates. Thomas quickly pressed Alara into a hollow behind a large metal crate. They held their breath as the raiders passed by, their heavy boots pounding on the ground. When the path was clear, Thomas whispered, "Too close. We need another way in." They found a narrow ventilation shaft near the back of the control tower. It was small and dark, but it led straight inside. Thomas took out a small tool from his pack and worked quietly to open the grate. "After you," he said. Alara crawled in first, the cold metal scraping against her palms. Thomas followed closely, his pistol ready but unused. The shaft twisted and turned before opening into a dimly lit room filled with consoles and blinking lights. Thomas immediately went to work on the controls, fingers flying over the holographic screens. "I'm shutting down their communications and alarms," he said softly. Alara kept watch, listening for any sound from the rest of the base. She felt the weight of the mission. One mistake could mean capture or worse. Suddenly, a soft beep sounded from the door. "Someone's coming," Alara warned. Thomas finished his work and nodded. "We have about 30 seconds before they know something is wrong. We need to move." They slipped through a side door into a long hallway. The sound of footsteps echoed ahead. Alara's heart pounded. She pressed herself against the wall as the raiders walked past, speaking in low voices. Once they were gone, Thomas led her to the holding cells, metal cages built into the rock walls. Inside, a few prisoners looked up in surprise and hope. Elara moved quickly to the control panel. "Can you open them?" Thomas nodded and activated the release. The cell doors slid open with a hiss. One by one, the prisoners stepped out, nodding their thanks. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the base. The raid was discovered. Thomas grabbed Alara's arm. "We have to go now." They ran through the winding corridors as guards shouted and ran after them. The bond between them sharpened, their movements perfectly timed. Alara ducked under a low pipe just before Thomas pulled her back from a blast of plasma fire. They reached the outer gate of the camp, where their freed prisoners waited with stolen weapons. "Cover us," Thomas said. The prisoners fought back fiercely, buying them time to escape into the forest beyond. As they ran through the trees, Alara looked at Thomas with new respect. "I thought I could do this alone." Thomas shook his head. "No one does. Not in this galaxy." The bond between them pulsed stronger than ever, a reminder that together, they were stronger than any enemy. Far away, in the shadows of the rift, the pirate leader Vark clenched his fists in anger. "They have escaped," he growled. "But this is not over. The princess and her protector will pay. If you want, I can continue with part 7. The choice of the princess, where Alara must decide her." The early light of dawn cast soft pink and orange hues over the quiet forest where Princess Alara and Thomas rested. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Around them, the forest whispered gently as small animals began to stir from their nighttime shelters. Alara sat on a fallen log, her silver robes dusty and torn from their long journey. Her eyes, once sharp and proud, now held a new softness mixed with thoughtfulness and uncertainty. Thomas sat beside her, his dark uniform stained from their escape, but his posture still strong and steady. The bond between them hummed quietly, a constant reminder of the connection they had forged through danger and trust. Alara finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "I never thought I would come this far with a human." Thomas looked at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "I never thought I'd find a bond like this with a Varellan princess." She laughed softly, the sound almost foreign to her own ears. "You've taught me much about strength and trust, and you've taught me about courage and hope." Thomas replied, "Our worlds are different, but that doesn't mean we can't protect each other." Alara nodded slowly, then looked down at her hands. "When this is over, if this is over, I will have to decide what kind of leader I want to be. One who trusts her people, or one who closes herself off from those she fears." Thomas's gaze grew serious. Your choice will change everything for Varela and for Earth. Their moment of peace was short-lived. A sudden rustling in the bushes snapped them both to alertness. Out stepped a small group of their freed prisoners, led by a young Varelan woman with keen eyes. "Princess, the raiders are regrouping," she said urgently. "They will return soon." Stronger and angrier, Alara stood, her resolve hardening. "Then we must be ready. We cannot let them take our home again." Thomas nodded. "We'll gather allies, build defenses, and strike when the time is right." Over the next days, Alara and Thomas traveled between hidden camps and friendly villages. The bond between them grew deeper, guiding their decisions and strengthening their spirits. They shared stories, fears, and hopes, two very different beings learning to work as one. The people they met began to believe in the peace treaty, not just as words on paper, but as a real promise of safety and cooperation. One evening, as they prepared for a council meeting in a forest clearing, Alara turned to Thomas. "The bond saved us. I admit I was wrong to refuse it before." Thomas smiled gently. "It takes courage to admit that." Alara took a deep breath. "I will accept the bond fully, not just as protection, but as a symbol that our peoples can unite." Thomas reached out and took her hand. The faint glow of the bond flared stronger between them. The final battle came swiftly. The raiders struck at dawn, their ships cutting through the morning mist like dark arrows. But Alara and Thomas were ready. Together, with their allies from both worlds, they fought fiercely to defend the capital. The bond between them was more than energy, it was a shared will, a harmony that made them unstoppable. Side by side, they led their people through the chaos. When the last raider ship fled into the rift, silence settled over the city once more. The twin suns rose higher, bathing Varela in golden light. Alara looked at Thomas, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. "You saved my life, and the future of my people." Thomas shook his head. "We saved each other." The peace treaty was renewed with new strength, and the bond between Alara and Thomas became a symbol of hope across the stars. Alara had chosen to trust, not just a human protector, but the possibility of a united future for both their worlds. And as the crystal towers of Varela glittered in the sunlight, a new chapter began, one where differences were bridges, not walls.